A simple woman showed her ID. Guards laughed, then froze when the emblem glowed. She looked like no one special, just a tired traveler in worn-out clothes, asking to enter the most secure military base in the country. The guards mocked her, smirked, and scoffed, until her ID lit up in gold, and their screens flashed a name they never expected. But she's not here for praise. She's hunting a traitor, one she once loved, who's hiding a weapon that could erase an entire town. What do you do when the hero of a war finds out she was just a pawn in the enemy's game? Every story brings us a little closer together. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. It's a joy to see how far this family of listeners reaches. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the concrete barriers of Fort Meridian. Captain Lydia Blackwood adjusted the strap of her weathered backpack as she approached the heavily fortified entrance. Her plain civilian clothes, faded jeans and a simple navy sweater, drew immediate skeptical glances from the guards stationed at the checkpoint. Sergeant Mills, a stocky man with close-cropped hair, exchanged a knowing look with Corporal Jensen before addressing her. "Ma'am, I think you might be lost. This is a restricted military facility." His tone carried the practiced patience of someone used to turning away confused civilians. "I need to enter the compound," Lydia stated simply, her green eyes steady and unflinching. Corporal Jensen, tall and lanky with a prominent Adam's apple, didn't try to hide his smirk. "Right, and I need a vacation in Hawaii. This isn't a tourist attraction, lady." Lydia reached into her pocket and produced her identification card. The plastic was scratched and worn, the photo barely visible through a web of scuffs. She held it out without comment. "Oh, this is rich," Mills chuckled, taking the battered card between his thumb and forefinger like it might be contaminated. "Jensen, get a load of this. Looks like something my kid made in arts and crafts." Jensen's shoulders shook with barely contained laughter as he took the card. "Well, procedure is procedure. Might as well run it through." He approached the scanner, still grinning. "Wouldn't want to turn away a general now, would we?" The moment he inserted the card into the reader, everything changed. A brilliant golden light emanated from the military emblem embedded in the plastic, bathing the checkpoint in an ethereal glow. Both guards' computer screens flashed to life with bold text, "Priority Alpha, General Lydia Blackwood, the Phoenix." The transformation in the guard's demeanor was instant and dramatic. The blood drained from Jensen's face so quickly, he had to grab the edge of his desk for support. Mills' jaw dropped open, his eyes wide with shock and recognition. The Phoenix," Mills stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "The hero of Kandahar Valley." Everyone in the military knew the story. 3 years ago, during what should have been a routine peacekeeping mission, 2,000 civilians and military personnel had been trapped in the Kandahar Valley. Enemy forces had them surrounded with no hope of escape or rescue. Then Captain Blackwood had orchestrated what many considered to be the most brilliant tactical maneuver of the decade, creating a diversion that allowed her to infiltrate enemy lines alone. She had managed to disable their communications network and redirect their forces, opening a narrow window for evacuation. Not a single life was lost that day. The press had dubbed her the Phoenix, the legendary bird that rose from the ashes to bring hope. And now here she stood before them, in civilian clothes with a simple backpack while they had been treating her like a lost tourist. "General Blackwood, Jensen's voice cracked as he tried to form words. His hands trembled as he carefully removed her ID card from the scanner and offered it back with both hands, head slightly bowed. Lydia accepted the card quietly, tucking it back into her pocket. Her expression remained neutral, showing neither anger at their previous behavior nor satisfaction at their current discomfort. She simply waited, knowing they would now do their jobs properly. "Please proceed right through, General," Mills said, his voice now crisp and professional despite his still pale complexion. He quickly entered the necessary codes to open the main gate. "Would you like an escort to—" "That won't be necessary, Sergeant," Lydia replied calmly. She adjusted her backpack once more and walked through the now open gate with measured steps, her bearing quietly dignified despite her casual attire. As she passed through the checkpoint, she could hear the guard's whispered conversation behind her. I can't believe we just... To the Phoenix. We're never going to live this down. Lydia continued forward, leaving the flustered guards in her wake. The weight of her backpack felt heavier now, much like the burden of her reputation. She had never asked to be a legend, had never wanted the nickname or the stories, but right now that reputation had served its purpose, gaining her access to the facility where she needed to be. The ghost of a smile crossed her face as she remembered something her father used to say. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the one you carry, it's the one they think you might have. Today, her weapon had been nothing more than a battered ID card and a story that had grown far beyond her control. Lydia's footsteps echoed softly through Fort Meridian's stark corridors. The familiar military efficiency surrounded her. Polished floors, regulation gray walls, and security cameras positioned at precise intervals. Everything exactly as protocol dictated. She allowed muscle memory to guide her while her mind processed the real reason for her presence. The intelligence report was still fresh in her thoughts. Its contents had felt like a physical blow when she first read them 3 days ago. Colonel Marcus Vance, commanding officer of Fort Meridian, was secretly arranging the sale of experimental weapons to hostile foreign agents. The evidence was substantial: suspicious financial transactions, unauthorized access to restricted weapon storage, encrypted communications with known arms dealers. Her throat tightened as she passed a wall of military honors. There, among the framed achievements, was a photograph from 6 years ago. A younger version of herself stood proudly beside Colonel Vance as he pinned a commendation medal to her uniform. His silver hair caught the sunlight, and his blue eyes sparkled with what she had believed was genuine pride. The memory stung like an open wound. "You have the sharpest tactical mind I've ever encountered," he had told her that day, his hand lingering on her shoulder. "But more importantly, you understand that strategy serves principles, not the other way around." Lydia paused at an intersection, using the moment to note the positions of security cameras and guard stations. The facility's layout was a masterpiece of defensive design. Multiple security checkpoints, controlled access points, overlapping fields of surveillance. She had once admired how Vance had upgraded the security systems. Now she wondered if those improvements were meant to protect military secrets or hide his own betrayal. Her mind drifted to their shared history. Vance had been more than just her commanding officer. He had been her mentor, her confidant, and eventually her lover. During countless missions, she had trusted him with her life. In quiet moments between operations, they had shared their hopes for making the world safer, their belief in protecting the innocent. His passion for justice had seemed so genuine, his integrity unshakable. Military strategy isn't just about winning battles, he had taught her during one of their late-night strategy sessions. It's about preserving what's worth fighting for. The memory of his voice, warm and sincere, made her current reality even harder to bear. How many of those intimate conversations had been lies? How long had he been planning to sell out everything they had sworn to protect? Lydia observed a patrol of armed guards passing by, their weapons at ready position. The security presence was heavier than usual. She noted the patrol patterns, filing away the information for later. Her tactical training, the very skills Vance had helped her hone, would now be used to expose his crimes. She remembered their last mission together just before she had been promoted to general. They had been pinned down under heavy fire, and Vance had risked his life to drag her to safety. His hands had been steady as he treated her wound, his voice calm as he radioed for backup. That was the night they first kissed, the adrenaline and relief of survival breaking down their professional barriers. "We protect our own," he had whispered against her lips. "Always." The betrayal felt like a physical ache in her chest. The man who had taught her everything about military strategy, honor, and duty was now betraying those very principles. The hands that had once tended her wounds were now selling weapons to those who would harm innocent people. The mind that had helped shape her tactical thinking was now plotting against everything they once stood for. Lydia reached the central security hub, where multiple corridors converged. Screens displayed various sections of the facility, and armed personnel monitored the feeds with practiced vigilance. She noted the positions of the emergency exits, the weapons lockers, the communication centers. Every detail could be crucial in the investigation ahead. A junior officer nodded respectfully as she passed. "General Blackwood, welcome to Fort Meridian." "Thank you, Lieutenant," she replied, maintaining her composed exterior while her heart ached. This was Vance's command, his life's work. Soon she would have to tear it all down, expose his crimes, and arrest the man she had once loved. The man who had believed in her before she became the Phoenix. The man who had helped make her the soldier she was today. The weight of her mission pressed down on her like a physical burden. This wasn't just about stopping a weapons sale or catching a traitor. This was about confronting the possibility that love, trust, and shared principles could all be illusions. That the person who knew you best could betray you worst. But she had a duty to fulfill. The lives at risk from those experimental weapons were more important than her broken heart. Vance had taught her that himself. The mission comes first, personal feelings second. She would honor that lesson even as she brought down the man who taught it to her. Lydia accessed the facility's secure archives through a hidden back door in the security system, a vulnerability she had discovered years ago during a routine inspection. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard as she navigated through classified files, her heart pounding with each new revelation. The first red flag appeared in the weapons inventory logs. Experimental prototypes were being marked as decommissioned due to malfunction, but the power consumption records showed they were still being tested in the underground labs. The discrepancy was clever, buried under layers of bureaucratic paperwork that would fool most auditors. "Oh, Marcus," she whispered, her voice heavy with disappointment. "What have you done?" A security patrol passed by the office. Lydia remained perfectly still until their footsteps faded. She had chosen this quiet hour between shift changes, knowing the facility would be at its most vulnerable. The same tactical thinking Vance had praised her for was now being used against him. Deeper in the archives, she found personnel files marked with a subtle digital tag, one that wouldn't appear on routine searches. Each file belonged to someone who had died in the past 18 months, a maintenance worker who fell down an elevator shaft, a security officer killed in an accidental weapons discharge, a lab technician who suffered a fatal allergic reaction. Too many accidents, too many convenient deaths. Then she found Dr. Elena Vasquez's file. The brilliant scientist's death had been attributed to a laboratory fire 3 months ago. The official report cited equipment malfunction, but something about the details felt wrong. Lydia opened Dr. Vasquez's personal logs, and her breath caught. The last entry was dated the night of her death. "Colonel Vance's weapons sales must be exposed. The electromagnetic pulse device was never meant for defense. It's a city killer. I've documented everything. Isabella has the key, though she doesn't know it. If anything happens to me..." The entry ended abruptly. Lydia's hands trembled as she searched for more information about Isabella. She found her in the current personnel files. Isabella Vasquez, Dr. Vasquez's daughter, working as a junior engineer in the facility. The young woman had inherited her mother's position on the EMP weapon project, likely part of Vance's plan to maintain control over the technology. A blueprint of the electromagnetic pulse weapon filled the screen. The device was elegant in its terrible simplicity, capable of generating a massive electromagnetic surge that could disable electronics across an entire city. In the wrong hands, it could bring civilization to its knees, leaving millions without power, communication, or basic services. The sound of approaching footsteps made Lydia quickly close the files. 2 engineers walked past, discussing maintenance schedules. Through the office window, she caught a glimpse of a young woman with long, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wire-rimmed glasses framing determined brown eyes. Isabella Vasquez. The young engineer carried herself with the same focused intensity Lydia remembered seeing in Dr. Vasquez during project briefings. She was heading toward the restricted labs, likely continuing her mother's work on the EMP weapon, unaware that she held the key to exposing her mother's murderer. Lydia's tactical mind raced through the implications. Vance wasn't just selling weapons, he was systematically eliminating anyone who might expose him. Dr. Vasquez had discovered his plan and paid with her life, but not before ensuring the evidence would survive through her daughter. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. The weapons sales were building toward something bigger. The EMP device wasn't just another item for sale, it was the centerpiece of Vance's operation. A weapon that could bring entire regions to their knees would be worth billions to the right buyers. Dr. Vasquez had died trying to prevent that future. Now her daughter unknowingly carried the evidence that could finish what her mother started. But if Vance discovered that Isabella had this information, she would become his next target. Lydia closed down the computer, her mind already formulating plans. She needed to reach Isabella before Vance realized the truth. The young engineer's life depended on it, and so did the safety of countless innocent people who would be affected if the EMP weapon fell into the wrong hands. The betrayal she had uncovered went beyond personal hurt. It was a calculated campaign of murder and manipulation orchestrated by the man who had taught her about honor and duty. Each death, each covered-up crime, revealed the true depth of Vance's corruption. As she left the office, Lydia's resolve hardened. She had to stop Vance not just for the sake of justice or national security, but to honor the courage of Dr. Vasquez and protect her daughter. The stakes were no longer just professional. They were deeply, terrifyingly personal. Lydia found Isabella in the engineering lab, hunched over a complex array of testing equipment. The young woman's dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her wire-rimmed glasses reflecting the blue glow of multiple computer screens. She worked with the focused intensity of someone trying to lose herself in technical problems rather than face painful memories. "Miss Vasquez," Lydia said softly, closing the lab door behind her. "We need to talk about your mother." Isabella's hands froze over the keyboard. Without turning around, she said, "There's nothing to talk about. It was an accident." "We both know that's not true." Lydia stepped closer, keeping her voice gentle but firm. "Your mother discovered something dangerous, something about Colonel Vance." Isabella spun around, her brown eyes sharp with suspicion. "Who are you really? Another one of Vance's people coming to check on me." "I'm General Lydia Blackwood." She held up her identification card, letting its embedded security features activate. "I'm here investigating weapons trafficking at this facility, and I believe your mother was murdered because she found evidence of it." The young engineer's expression shifted from suspicion to recognition. "The Phoenix?" She stood up straighter, studying Lydia's face. "My mother mentioned you once. She said you were one of the few high-ranking officers she trusted." "Elena was a brilliant scientist and a woman of integrity," Lydia said. "Her death wasn't an accident. I found her final log entry. She left something with you, didn't she?" Isabella glanced at the security cameras, then gestured for Lydia to follow her into a small equipment storage room. Once inside, she pulled out a small device from her pocket, a custom-built data drive carefully disguised as a standard power regulator. "Mom gave this to me 3 days before she died," Isabella explained, her voice tight with emotion. "She said it was important research data, but I could tell she was scared. She made me promise not to tell anyone about it or try to access it unless something happened to her." Lydia examined the device. "Have you decoded it?" "Parts of it." Isabella's fingers trembled slightly as she took the drive back. Mom was brilliant with encryption. She built multiple layers of security that only unlock when specific conditions are met. I've been working on it during off hours, trying not to draw attention. They connected the drive to Isabella's secure workstation. The screen filled with fragments of decoded data, financial transactions, communication logs, and technical specifications. Isabella's engineering expertise proved crucial as she explained the weapon systems detailed in the files. "See these power signatures?" She pointed to a series of graphs. "They're from the electromagnetic pulse weapon we've been developing. Mom discovered that the test results were being altered in official reports to hide its true capabilities." Lydia leaned closer, studying the data. "The weapon's more powerful than reported?" "Much more." Isabella pulled up another file. "It's not just a localized disruption device anymore. They've modified it to affect entire cities. One detonation could disable everything. Power grids, communications, medical equipment. People would die." The evidence was damning. Dr. Vasquez had documented months of illegal weapons sales, each transaction carefully hidden behind shell companies and falsified requisition orders. The communications showed Vance negotiating with foreign buyers, promising them weapons that could bring nations to their knees. Mom knew what they were planning. Isabella said, her voice breaking slightly. She was gathering proof, building an airtight case. Then there was a fire in her lab. Her hands clenched into fists. I knew it wasn't an accident. The way Vance acted at her memorial service, offering condolences while barely hiding his satisfaction, I wanted to scream the truth right there. Lydia placed a steadying hand on Isabella's shoulder. Your mother was incredibly brave, and so are you. Continuing her work, knowing the risks. That takes real courage. I had to do something, Isabella replied. Mom believed in using science to protect people, not hurt them. I couldn't let them twist her work into weapons for terrorists and criminals. They spent the next hour analyzing the encrypted files, with Isabella's technical knowledge proving invaluable in understanding the complex weapon specifications. The young engineer's determination to honor her mother's memory showed in every careful explanation, every decoded fragment of evidence. There's more still encrypted, Isabella said, securing the drive again. Mom built in timing delays between decryption phases to prevent anyone from accessing everything at once. It was her way of making sure the evidence couldn't be easily destroyed. Smart woman, Lydia said. She knew exactly what she was dealing with. She looked at Isabella with newfound respect. The young woman had her mother's brilliance and bravery, channeling her grief into action, rather than letting it paralyze her. Together, they began formulating a plan to continue gathering evidence while staying under Vance's radar. Their unlikely partnership, born from shared loss and a desire for justice, represented hope that Elena Vasquez's sacrifice would not be in vain. Isabella's fingers flew across the keyboard, decrypting another layer of her mother's files. Her eyes widened as strings of data filled the screen. General Blackwood, look at this, she said, her voice tight with urgency. These are detailed plans for a military exercise scheduled for Thursday morning. Lydia leaned closer, scanning the documents. That's less than 48 hours from now. Her stomach tightened as she recognized Vance's signature planning style in the operation details. This isn't a real exercise. No, Isabella agreed, pulling up more files. Mom discovered communications between Vance and the buyers. The exercise is just a cover. She opened another document showing transport schedules and security rotations. He's using it to move the EMP weapon off-site. Lydia studied the timeline, her military training helping her piece together Vance's strategy. It's clever, she admitted, despite her disgust. A routine training operation means regular security protocols will be relaxed. Personnel will be spread thin across multiple locations. Isabella nodded, pointing to a map overlay. The exercise involves a mock convoy deployment to these 3 locations. Her finger traced the planned routes. But look at this secondary path here. It's listed as an emergency alternate route, but Mom's notes show it leads directly to an abandoned airstrip 20 miles from the base. Perfect for a quick transfer to waiting buyers, Lydia said grimly. She could see why Vance had chosen this plan. Everything would appear completely normal until it was too late. The weapon will be gone before anyone realizes it's missing. More decrypted files revealed the full scope of Vance's preparation. He had carefully positioned loyal personnel in key security positions and arranged for specific surveillance systems to be down for maintenance during crucial moments of the transfer. The buyers are already in position, Isabella said, showing Lydia a series of coded messages her mother had intercepted. They've been setting up their operation for weeks, disguised as a private construction company working near the airstrip. Lydia felt a familiar tension building in her shoulders, the same feeling she'd had before major operations in the field. Time was their enemy now. In less than 48 hours, one of the most dangerous weapons ever created would be in the hands of terrorists. What's the weapon's current status, she asked. Isabella pulled up the latest test results. Final calibration was completed yesterday. It's fully operational. Her hands trembled slightly as she explained the technical specifications. The power output is massive, far beyond what's listed in the official reports. One detonation could disable everything electronic within a 50-mile radius. Hospitals, emergency services, power stations, they'd all go dark instantly. Thousands would die in the first hours alone, Lydia said quietly, thinking of vulnerable patients on life support, traffic systems failing, communication networks collapsing. And that's just the beginning. They spent the next hour analyzing every detail of Vance's plan, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. The operation was well designed, with multiple backup plans and security measures in place. Vance had learned his strategic thinking from Lydia herself, and she recognized his thoroughness. "We need to be careful how we move against this," Lydia said, pacing the small room. "Vance has too many loyal people in key positions. If we alert the wrong person or move too soon, he'll know we're onto him." Isabella nodded, understanding the danger. "We can't risk him accelerating the timeline or changing the transfer location. We'd lose our only chance to stop him." "Exactly." Lydia returned to the computer, studying the exercise plans again. "We need more evidence. Something concrete that proves the weapon theft is planned. Right now, it's all circumstantial. Vance could claim the buyer's presence is coincidental, that the alternate route was just standard contingency planning." "Mom thought of that too," Isabella said. She accessed another encrypted file, this one showing a complex series of security protocols. She built a hidden tracking system into the weapon's control module. If we can activate it without being detected, we'll have proof of exactly where the weapon goes during the exercise. Lydia felt the first stirrings of hope. This was what they needed, a way to catch Vance in the act. But they would have to move carefully. One wrong step, and everything would unravel. They began formulating a strategy, combining Isabella's technical knowledge with Lydia's tactical experience. Time was against them, but they had two critical advantages: the element of surprise and Isabella's access to her mother's brilliant contingency plans. "We'll need to work fast," Lydia said, checking her watch. 48 hours isn't much time to prevent a weapon of mass destruction from disappearing into enemy hands." Isabella's face showed the same determination Lydia had seen in Elena's eyes years ago. "We'll stop him," she said firmly. "We have to. Mom gave her life to expose this. We can't let her sacrifice be for nothing." Lydia's eyes burned from staring at the screen for hours as she methodically worked through the encrypted files. Each new document revealed another layer of Vance's corruption, but nothing prepared her for what she found buried deep in a folder labeled Operation Scorched Earth. Her hands began to shake as she read the first few lines. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This can't be right." Isabella looked up from her own work. "What did you find?" Lydia couldn't answer immediately. The words on the screen blurred as memories of the Kandahar Valley siege flooded back. The desperate faces of trapped civilians, the sound of gunfire echoing through the mountains, the weight of responsibility as she led 2,000 people to safety through enemy lines. "The Kandahar Valley attack," Lydia finally managed, her voice hollow. It wasn't what we thought." She pulled up more documents, each one confirming her worst fears. Vance orchestrated the whole thing. Isabella moved closer, reading over Lydia's shoulder. The documents showed detailed communications between Vance and enemy forces, carefully disguised as routine intelligence reports. He had systematically leaked troop movements and security protocols, creating the perfect conditions for an attack. "He wanted chaos," Lydia said, her voice breaking. There were 3 generals stationed in the valley that day, all potential rivals for his advancement. He thought the attack would eliminate them, clear his path to promotion. She scrolled through more pages, each revelation like a physical blow. "When I managed to save everyone, I actually helped cover up what he'd done. My actions made it look like a victory instead of the betrayal it really was." The truth hit her with crushing force. Her greatest triumph, the moment that had defined her career and earned her the nickname the Phoenix, was built on Vance's treachery. Every commendation, every word of praise felt tainted now. She thought of the soldiers who died that day, of the civilians who suffered, all because of one man's ambition. "I trusted him completely," Lydia said, pushing away from the desk. Her legs felt unsteady as she paced the small room. "He was my mentor, She couldn't finish the sentence. The memory of their relationship, once precious, now made her feel physically ill. "He taught me everything I knew about strategy and leadership. I thought he represented everything honorable about military service. Isabella watched with growing concern as Lydia's carefully maintained composure crumbled. General Blackwood, he used me, Lydia continued, her voice rising with anger and pain. He used my loyalty, my skills, even my love for him. I became the perfect distraction, the hero everyone focused on while he continued his schemes. She slammed her hand against the wall, embracing the sharp sting of pain. How many other accidents has he arranged? How many other lives has he destroyed for his own gain? Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Years of military discipline warred with the tide of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Everything she believed about that day, about her relationship with Vance, about her own role in events, it all felt like a carefully constructed lie. Isabella stood and approached Lydia cautiously. My mother always said that the true measure of a hero isn't in never being deceived, she said softly, but in what they do, once they know the truth. The words cut through Lydia's spiral of pain and rage. She took a deep breath, then another, forcing herself to think clearly. Isabella was right. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still in their hands. Understanding the full scope of Vance's betrayal only made their mission more crucial. Your mother was a wise woman, Lydia said, wiping her eyes. She returned to the computer, viewing the documents with new determination. And she left us everything we need to stop him from destroying more lives. We'll make it right, Isabella said firmly. For my mother, for those soldiers in Kandahar Valley, for everyone he's hurt. Lydia nodded, her military training reasserting itself as she focused on the mission ahead. The pain of betrayal still burned in her chest, but now it fueled her resolve rather than paralyzed her. She had unknowingly helped cover Vance's crimes once before. She wouldn't let him use her again. Let's get back to work, she said, pulling up the plans for the upcoming weapon transfer. We have less than 48 hours to ensure Vance's last betrayal fails. Colonel Marcus Vance stood in the facility's surveillance center, his jaw tightening as he watched the security feeds. Multiple screens showed different angles of Lydia and Isabella working together in one of the engineering labs, surrounded by computer terminals and stacks of documents. His hands clenched into fists as he realized what they were reviewing. It seems my former student has learned too much, he muttered, reaching for the facility's master control panel. His fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating emergency protocols. Time to remind her who taught her everything she knows about tactical warfare. Red warning lights began flashing throughout Fort Meridian. The heavy thud of security doors slamming shut echoed through the corridors. In the engineering lab, Lydia's head snapped up at the sound of alarms blaring. He knows we're here, she said, quickly gathering the most crucial documents. Isabella, grab what you can. We need to move. Isabella shoved files into her bag, her hands trembling but movements precise. The security doors are designed to withstand explosives, she said. Once they're locked, there's no way out without proper authorization. Which Vance now controls, Lydia finished grimly. She checked her weapon, grateful she'd kept it concealed during her entry to the facility. How well do you know the building's layout? Before Isabella could answer, Vance's voice boomed through the intercom system, smooth and controlled despite the menace in his words. My dear Lydia, he said, his tone almost conversational. Did you really think I wouldn't notice you snooping around my facility? I taught you better than that. Lydia motioned for Isabella to stay quiet as they moved toward the lab's rear exit. Through the reinforced windows, they could see armed men in security uniforms moving through the main corridor. Those aren't regular facility guards, Isabella whispered, recognizing none of the faces. Mercenaries, Lydia confirmed. Vance's private army. The intercom crackled again. You always were my best student, Lydia. So determined, so principled. Vance's voice carried a hint of mock sadness. That's what made you such a perfect tool. Your reputation for integrity made you the ideal cover for my operations. Who would question anything when the legendary Phoenix vouched for it? They slipped into a narrow maintenance corridor just as heavy boots thundered past their previous position. Isabella led them through a series of turns, using her knowledge of the facility's engineering layout to avoid the main passages. But now you've become a liability, Vance continued over the speakers. Just like Dr. Vasquez. Such a waste of talent, but I can't have you interfering with tomorrow's transfer. I'd say I'm sorry it has to end this way, but we both know sentiment is for fools. Isabella's face hardened at the casual mention of her mother's murder. Lydia squeezed her shoulder in silent support as they pressed on. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Lydia held up her hand, stopping their movement as she heard approaching footsteps from multiple directions. They were being herded. "The ventilation shaft," Isabella whispered urgently, pointing to an access panel near the floor. "It connects to the lower levels. We can use it to bypass the security doors." Lydia covered their position while Isabella quickly removed the panel. The shaft was narrow but navigable. They could hear Vance's mercenaries coordinating their search, their radio chatter echoing through the hallways. "You can't hide forever, Lydia," Vance's voice taunted. "Every exit is sealed. Every communication line is cut. Even if you somehow survive until tomorrow's exercise, the EMP weapon will still be mine, and then I'll use it to eliminate every trace of evidence against me, starting with that charming little town of Cedar Falls where Isabella's brother lives." Isabella froze halfway into the shaft. "My brother," she gasped. "He's threatening my brother." "He's trying to get in our heads," Lydia said firmly, helping her continue forward. "We won't let him succeed." She followed Isabella into the shaft, replacing the panel behind them just as Boots appeared around the corner. They crawled through the cramped space using Isabella's knowledge of the facility's infrastructure to navigate. The metal walls amplified every sound, including Vance's continuing psychological warfare over the intercom. "Remember Kandahar Valley, Lydia? Remember how proud you were when I pinned those medals on your chest? All those lives you saved, never knowing you were just cleaning up my mess. Your finest hour was nothing but a convenient solution to my problem." Lydia kept moving, pushing aside the pain of his words. They had to focus on survival now. The investigation had become a deadly game of cat and mouse, with Vance holding most of the advantages, but he had taught her too well, trained her too thoroughly in the art of tactical thinking. She wouldn't let him win, not with so many lives at stake. As they continued through the ventilation system, the sound of searching mercenaries echoed all around them. The facility had become a maze-like prison, with danger lurking around every corner. But between Isabella's technical knowledge and Lydia's combat experience, they had a fighting chance. They just had to stay alive long enough to stop Vance's plan and expose his crimes. The ventilation shaft grew narrower as they crawled deeper into the facility's underground levels. Lydia's knees scraped against the metal as she followed Isabella through the cramped space. The sound of boots and shouted commands echoed through the walls around them. "There's an access point ahead," Isabella whispered. "It leads to the maintenance tunnels." They emerged into a dimly lit concrete passage lined with pipes and electrical conduits. The air was heavy with moisture and the musty smell of underground spaces. Lydia helped Isabella to her feet, both of them stretching their cramped muscles. A distant explosion shook the tunnel, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. "They're using charges to flush us out," Lydia said, her expression grim. "Which way?" Isabella pointed left. "The service corridors run parallel to the main facility. We can use them to circle back to the secure storage area." They moved quickly through the winding passages, their footsteps echoing despite their attempts at stealth. Isabella led them through a maze of intersections, using her engineering knowledge to navigate the complex network of tunnels. "Wait," Lydia held up her hand, stopping them both. In the silence, they heard the metallic click of weapons being readied around the next corner. "Alternative route?" she whispered. Isabella nodded, pointing to a maintenance door. "Through here. It connects to the lower utility level." They slipped through just as gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets pinged off the metal door as Lydia slammed it shut, jamming it with a piece of broken pipe. The utility level was a vast space filled with massive water tanks and rumbling machinery. Their path wound between the equipment, offering cover from pursuit. Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. Chunks of concrete rained down from above. "They're collapsing the tunnels," Isabella said, her eyes wide with fear. "They're trying to trap us down here," Lydia confirmed. "We need to move faster." They ran now, no longer worried about stealth. The sound of pursuit grew louder, punctuated by more explosions. Cracks appeared in the walls around them as the facility's structure groaned under the assault. A massive blast ahead of them brought down a section of ceiling, blocking their intended path with rubble. Isabella stumbled backward, but Lydia caught her arm. This way. Isabella pulled them toward a narrow service passage. It leads to the emergency stairwell. Water began spraying from ruptured pipes, quickly flooding the lower sections of the tunnel. The liquid rose around their ankles as they splashed through the darkened corridor. A bullet whizzed past Lydia's head, sparking off the wall. She pushed Isabella behind a concrete pillar, drawing her weapon to return fire. The exchange was brief, but bought them precious seconds to retreat further into the tunnel system. The water level rose steadily as more pipes burst under the structural stress. Soon it reached their knees, slowing their progress. Behind them, they could hear the mercenaries shouting as they discovered the flooding. "There!" Isabella pointed to a maintenance ladder leading up to a higher level. They reached it just as another explosion brought down more of the ceiling behind them. Water churned below, filled with debris and broken equipment. Lydia pushed Isabella up first, covering their retreat as the mercenaries tried to advance through the flooded passage. The ladder's rungs were slick with water and rust, making the climb treacherous. A final massive explosion shook the entire structure. The tunnel behind them collapsed completely, sending a wave of water and debris in all directions. Lydia barely managed to pull herself up onto the higher level as the ladder broke away below her. They lay on the grating, gasping for breath, soaked and scraped but alive. Through the floor they could hear the muffled sounds of rushing water filling the collapsed tunnels. "You're bleeding," Isabella said, noticing a gash on Lydia's arm where debris had caught her. "So are you," Lydia replied, gesturing to a cut on Isabella's forehead. "But we're alive. Where are we?" Isabella oriented herself, looking around at their new surroundings. "East Wing, sub-level 2. We're closer to the secure storage area now, but we'll have to find another way in," Lydia finished. She checked her weapon, confirming it was still functional despite the water. "At least the collapse will slow down pursuit from this direction." They helped each other up, both wincing from various cuts and bruises. The chase had left them battered, but had also proven they could work together under extreme pressure. Isabella's knowledge of the facility's layout had been as crucial as Lydia's combat experience in keeping them alive. "Ready?" Lydia asked, checking that Isabella could continue. Isabella nodded, her determination visible despite her exhaustion. "Ready. They'll be watching the obvious routes now, but I know a few more paths they might not expect." Lydia and Isabella found temporary shelter in a maintenance closet on sub-level 2. The small space was cramped but secure, giving them a moment to catch their breath and assess their situation. Under the harsh fluorescent light, they looked like survivors of a disaster, clothes soaked and torn, faces streaked with dirt and blood from their underground escape. "Let me see that cut," Lydia said, finding a first aid kit mounted on the wall. She cleaned the gash on Isabella's forehead with gentle movements, her tactical training extending to basic medical care. Isabella winced but stayed still. The secure storage area is 2 levels up. That's where they're keeping the EMP weapon before tomorrow's transfer. She pulled out a tablet from her waterproof bag, miraculously intact after their ordeal. "I can access the facility's maintenance logs from here. Maybe there's something—" She stopped suddenly, her face draining of color. "What is it?" Lydia moved closer, looking over Isabella's shoulder at the screen. "These power readings from the weapons containment unit." Isabella's fingers flew across the display, pulling up technical specifications and energy measurements. "They don't match the standard testing protocols. The weapon's core is already active." Lydia frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means—" Isabella's voice shook as she pulled up more data. "The weapon isn't just being prepared for transfer, it's being prepared for detonation." She looked up at Lydia, her eyes wide with horror. "Vance has modified the core's containment protocols. He's turned it into a bomb." Lydia's military training kicked in as she processed this new information. "He's planning to double-cross the buyers?" Isabella nodded, her hands trembling as she showed Lydia more technical readings. The weapon's already programmed to detonate during the transfer. The explosion would kill everyone present and destroy all evidence of the sale. She paused, swallowing hard. But that's not the worst part. She pulled up a map showing the weapon's blast radius. The glowing circle of destruction extended far beyond Fort Meridian's boundaries, encompassing a nearby town. Cedar Falls, Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. 3,000 people live there. My brother. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting back tears. Tommy's in 8th grade at Cedar Falls Middle School. He's all I have left since Mom died. Lydia felt her chest tighten as the full scope of Vance's plan became clear. He wasn't just planning to eliminate witnesses. He was orchestrating a massacre that would kill thousands of innocent people. The electromagnetic pulse would destroy everything, Isabella continued, her technical knowledge making the scenario even more terrifying. Power systems, communications, medical equipment, and the physical explosion would level most of the town. She looked at Lydia with desperate eyes. Tommy's school is within the primary blast zone. Lydia placed a steadying hand on Isabella's shoulder, feeling the young engineer tremble. We're not going to let that happen. How could he do this? Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. All those people. Children. Because he's a sociopath, Lydia said, her tone hardening as she thought about her former mentor. I've seen it before, but I never wanted to believe it. In Kandahar Valley, he sacrificed hundreds of lives for his own gain. Now he's willing to destroy an entire town just to cover his tracks. Isabella wiped her eyes, her grief transforming into determination. The transfer is scheduled for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. That gives us less than 15 hours to stop both the weapon sale and the detonation. Can you disable the weapon remotely? Isabella shook her head. Not from here. We'll need direct access to the control systems in the secure storage area, and even then, she hesitated. Disarming it will be incredibly complex. One wrong move could trigger an immediate detonation. Lydia checked her weapon and the few remaining rounds of ammunition. Then we'll have to be perfect. She met Isabella's gaze. Your brother, those 3,000 people in Cedar Falls, they're counting on us even if they don't know it yet. Isabella straightened up, her mother's strength showing in her determined expression. I won't let Vance destroy my hometown or kill my brother. Mom died trying to expose his crimes. I won't let her sacrifice be for nothing. We'll stop him, Lydia promised, her tactical mind already forming plans. But first, we need to find a way into that secure storage area, and Vance will be expecting us to try. Isabella turned back to her tablet, pulling up the facility's schematics. I know every inch of this place's infrastructure. There might be a way through the environmental control systems, but we'll have to time it perfectly. They bent over the plans together, two women united by determination to prevent a massacre. Outside their temporary sanctuary, they could hear Vance's forces regrouping, preparing for the next phase of their hunt. But now the stakes were clear. This wasn't just about stopping a weapons sale or exposing a traitor. 3,000 lives hung in the balance, and time was running out. The dim emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the laboratory's steel walls as Lydia and Isabella made their final preparations. They had managed to reach the facility's central control room, where Isabella's fingers flew across multiple keyboards, her engineering expertise turning the building's own systems against their pursuers. Security grid is almost ready, Isabella said, her voice steady despite the tension. I've reprogrammed the fire suppression systems in sectors 3 through 7. She adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, checking the facility schematics on the main screen. When we trigger them, the mercenaries won't know what hit them. Lydia nodded, checking her borrowed weapon one last time. How many hostiles between us and the main lab? At least 15 mercenaries plus Vance? Isabella pulled up the security camera feeds. They're concentrated around the EMP weapon, but they've got teams patrolling all access points. Then we'll make our own access point. Lydia studied the layout, her tactical mind analyzing every angle. Your mother's research lab? It connects to the main chamber through the ventilation system, doesn't it? Isabella's eyes lit up with understanding. Yes, and I can override the environmental controls to create a diversion. Her fingers danced across the keyboard again. Activating emergency protocols now. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Isabella's carefully programmed sequence kicked in. Sprinkler systems activated in random sectors, security doors slammed shut, and ventilation fans roared to life at maximum power. Through the security feeds, they watched Vance's mercenaries scrambling to respond to multiple false emergencies. "Time to move," Lydia said, helping Isabella gather her equipment. "Stay close, and remember your training." They moved swiftly through the darkened corridors, Isabella leading them through maintenance passages she knew by heart. When two mercenaries appeared ahead, Lydia took them down with precise hand-to-hand combat moves she had taught Isabella during their hours of preparation. Isabella proved she had learned well. When a third guard emerged, she executed a perfect takedown using his own momentum against him. "Mom always said I was a quick study," she said, her voice mixing pride with sadness. They reached her mother's old lab, now dark and abandoned. Isabella went straight to the environmental control panel while Lydia secured the entrance. "The main ventilation shaft is behind that storage unit," Isabella said, pointing to a large cabinet. "I can trigger a pressure differential that will clear our path to the main lab." Suddenly, Vance's voice boomed through the facility's speakers. "I taught you better than this, Lydia. Using the building's systems against me? That's the kind of thinking I always admired in you." His tone turned cold. "But you're still so predictable." Gas began seeping through the lab's air vents. Isabella reacted instantly, typing commands into her tablet. "Reversing the airflow." The gas pulled back, drawn into the facility's filtration system. "Nice try, Marcus," Lydia muttered, helping Isabella shift the storage unit. "But you're not the only one who can adapt." They climbed into the ventilation shaft just as the first explosion rocked the facility. Isabella's programmed chain reaction was creating chaos throughout the complex. Through the metal walls of the shaft, they could hear mercenaries shouting in confusion as they dealt with multiple system failures. "The Phoenix rises from chaos," Isabella said, managing a small smile despite their dire situation. "Now I understand why they gave you that name." They emerged into a maintenance corridor one level above the main lab. Through reinforced windows, they could see the EMP weapon below, a massive device housed in a containment chamber, its core pulsing with deadly energy. Vance and his remaining forces had established defensive positions around it. "Ready?" Lydia asked, checking their position against Isabella's facility map. Isabella nodded, her mother's determination shining in her eyes. "Ready." Initiating final sequence. She activated her last set of programmed commands. Throughout the facility, power systems began failing in a cascading pattern. Emergency generators kicked in, creating a disorienting strobe effect with the lighting. In the confusion, Lydia and Isabella began their assault. They moved like a well-oiled machine, covering each other as they fought their way toward the main lab. Isabella used her knowledge of the facility to anticipate every counter-move, calling out warnings and directing them through the safest routes. Lydia's combat expertise kept them alive, her legendary skills proving why she had survived the Kandahar Valley siege. When a group of mercenaries cornered them in a side corridor, Isabella didn't hesitate. She triggered a localized power surge, overloading the electrical systems. The resulting shower of sparks drove their attackers back, giving Lydia the opening she needed to neutralize them. They fought their way down to the main lab level, Isabella's traps and Lydia's tactics clearing a path through Vance's forces. As they approached the final security door, Isabella pulled up the containment chamber's readings on her tablet. "The weapon's energy signature is still climbing," she reported, her voice tense. "We don't have much time." Lydia checked their remaining ammunition. "Then let's finish this." They shared a look of determination, two women brought together by betrayal and loss, now united in their mission to save thousands of innocent lives. With a nod, Lydia signaled for Isabella to open the final door. The time for preparation was over. The real battle was about to begin. The laboratory doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing Vance standing beside the massive EMP weapon. His silver hair gleamed under the harsh emergency lights, and his polished insignia caught every flash of the warning beacons. 6 mercenaries flanked him, weapons trained on the entrance. "Welcome home, Phoenix," Vance said, his voice carrying the same warmth it had during their years of training together. He held up a metallic control unit. One press of this trigger, and Cedar Falls becomes a cautionary tale about the dangers of technology. Lydia stepped into the lab, keeping her hands visible. Her mind raced through combat scenarios, but the math was brutal. Even she couldn't take down 6 trained shooters before one of them pulled a trigger. Not at this range. Not with Isabella's brother and 3,000 innocent lives hanging in the balance. "You taught me that sacrifice is the mark of a true leader," Lydia said, taking another step forward. "Time to practice what you preached." Isabella's voice crackled through Lydia's earpiece. "The weapon's charging sequence is accelerating. We're running out of time." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Stop right there, Lydia. You're good. The best I've ever trained, but you're not bulletproof." "You're right." Lydia slowly raised her hands. "I surrender." "Lydia, no." Isabella's whisper was desperate in her ear. "Check her for weapons," Vance ordered. 2 mercenaries approached, roughly patting Lydia down and removing her sidearm. She didn't resist. "The noble sacrifice play?" Vance laughed. "I expected better from you." "Did you expect Kandahar Valley?" Lydia asked, watching his face carefully. "Did you plan for me to survive your little trap there?" The mercenaries forced her to her knees, but Lydia kept her eyes locked on Vance. Behind him, she caught a glimpse of movement, Isabella slipping into position at the weapons control terminal, hidden from Vance's view by the massive device itself. "Kandahar was regrettable," Vance said, stepping closer. "Those deaths were necessary sacrifices for the greater good." "The greater good?" Lydia's voice cracked with genuine emotion. "You sacrificed 2,000 people for profit." "For change," Vance's composure slipped. "The system is broken, Lydia. You know it is. We fought and bled for politicians who see us as pawns. I'm just changing the game." Isabella's fingers flew across the control panel, her movements hidden by the low hum of the charging weapon. Lydia needed to keep Vance talking, keep his attention focused on her. "You taught me everything I know about tactics," Lydia said. "About duty. About love." She saw him flinch at the last word. Was any of it real? All of it was real. Vance moved closer, his guard dropping slightly as old emotions surfaced. "You were my finest student, Lydia. We could have changed the world together." "Almost done," Isabella whispered through the earpiece. 30 seconds to complete shutdown." "You're right about one thing," Lydia said, shifting her weight subtly. "You did teach me everything I know about tactics." Vance's eyes widened as he realized his mistake. He had moved within striking distance. Lydia exploded into motion, driving her shoulder into his midsection. The trigger unit flew from his hand as they crashed to the floor. The mercenaries couldn't fire without risking hitting their boss. In the chaos, Isabella emerged from behind the weapon, her tablet connected to the control systems. "It's done. Weapons disarmed." Vance and Lydia grappled on the ground, years of training together making their fight a deadly dance of precision strikes and counters. He knew all her moves, but she had learned new ones since Kandahar. "You're still so predictable," Vance snarled, blocking her strike. "No," Lydia said. "I've evolved." She switched to a combat style she had developed after their time together, breaking through his defenses with a series of strikes he had never seen before. The mercenaries moved to intervene, but Isabella had one last trick up her sleeve. She triggered the lab's fire suppression system, filling the room with dense white fog. In the confusion, Lydia managed to pin Vance face down, securing his hands behind his back. "The phoenix rises from chaos," she whispered in his ear, echoing the words he had once used to praise her tactical thinking. "You taught me that too." Facility security forces, alerted by Isabella's override of the lockdown protocols, stormed into the lab. They quickly took control, disarming the mercenaries and securing the weapon. Lydia pulled Vance to his feet as Isabella approached, holding up her tablet triumphantly. "The weapon's completely offline," she reported. "Cedar Falls is safe. My brother is safe." "This isn't over," Vance growled as security officers took him into custody. "No," Lydia agreed, watching her former mentor being led away. "But your part in it is—" The sun rose over Fort Meridian as military police vehicles surrounded the facility. Vance, his wrists bound in heavy steel cuffs, was led through the main gates where he had once commanded such respect. His perfectly pressed uniform now bore the wrinkles of struggle, and his silver hair was disheveled from the fight. "You'll never prove anything," he said as two MPs guided him toward an armored transport vehicle. Lydia stood straight-backed beside Isabella, holding up a tablet displaying Dr. Elena Vasquez's decoded files. "Your entire network is exposed, Marcus. Every arms deal, every shell company, every corrupt contact. Dr. Vasquez documented it all. Her daughter made sure that evidence survived." Isabella stepped forward, her eyes burning with quiet intensity. "My mother died protecting people from men like you. Today we finished what she started." Vance's confident facade cracked as he saw the depth of evidence against him. His mercenaries, those who had survived the confrontation, were being loaded into separate vehicles. The weapon trafficking operation he had spent years building was crumbling before his eyes. "The Kandahar Valley siege," Lydia said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "You orchestrated an attack that killed hundreds just to eliminate your rivals. But those deaths weren't necessary sacrifices. They were murders. And now everyone will know the truth." Military investigators swarmed the facility, securing evidence and documenting the disabled EMP weapon. The morning light streamed through the laboratory windows where, just hours before, they had fought for the lives of thousands. Isabella's phone buzzed with a text message. Her face softened as she read it. "My brother's school just reopened. He's safe. They all are." She looked up at Lydia with tears in her eyes. "We really did it." Lydia felt something shift inside her as she watched Vance being driven away. The weight of Kandahar Valley, the burden of unwitting complicity in his schemes, began to lift. She had spent years building her legend as the Phoenix, but only now did she truly understand what it meant to rise from ashes. "Your mother would be proud," Lydia said softly to Isabella. "Not just of what you did here, but of who you've become." Isabella wiped her eyes and squared her shoulders. "I've made a decision," she said. "I'm going to apply for officer training. Engineering is important, but after everything that's happened, I want to do more. I want to protect people like you do." Lydia felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. She had lost her mentor, but in doing so, she had found something more valuable, a chance to pass on the right lessons, to shape a protege who understood that power came with responsibility. 3 days later, Lydia stood in her dress uniform before a mirror in her quarters, adjusting her medals with practiced precision. The Phoenix insignia gleamed on her collar, no longer a burden of false glory, but a symbol of genuine service. A knock at the door revealed Isabella, dressed in civilian business attire but carrying herself with new military bearing. "Ready for your first day of preliminary training?" Lydia asked, noting how Isabella had already adopted some of her mannerisms. "Ready," Isabella replied with determination, "though I have to admit, the physical requirements look intense." Lydia smiled, remembering her own training days. "We'll start with the basics. Running drills at 0500 hours tomorrow." 05? You mean 5 o'clock in the morning? Isabella's eyes widened. "A phoenix rises with the sun," Lydia said, then caught herself using one of Vance's old phrases. But this time, the words carried a different meaning, not about glory or power, but about dedication to service. They walked together through Fort Meridian's corridors, drawing respectful nods from passing personnel. Isabella's engineering colleagues watched in surprise as she moved confidently alongside the legendary General Blackwood. "You know," Isabella said as they reached the training grounds, "my brother asked if you would come to his school's career day next month. He told all his friends that his sister works with the Phoenix." Lydia felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. After years of keeping people at arm's length, she had found a family she never expected, one built not on blood, but on shared values and mutual respect. "I'd be honored," she replied, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold. But first, let's see if you can keep up with your new mentor. Isabella grinned, ready for the challenge ahead. Lead the way, Phoenix. Together, they stepped into the morning light, a legendary warrior and her promising protege, ready to write a new chapter in both their stories. The legacy of the Phoenix would continue, not through tales of solitary heroism, but through the bonds of those who chose to stand together in service of something greater than themselves. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.